Hey everybody, it's Yugioh Master 88 here, and welcome to the late summer Orichalcos challenge easy mode deck profile. It's been a little while since the easy mode has had an update, and I am here to bring that update just for you guys. Normal mode and nightmare mode updates will be coming very soon, so keep a lookout for those. The process on starting on the hard difficulty mode will begin sometime mid-late this month towards early October, and a deck profile for that should be available around mid-late October, early November. So keep a lookout for the hard difficulty's very first revision. But for tonight, we got the easy mode of the Orichalcos challenge. Just as a refresher course on what the easy mode deck profile is, this is essentially a retweaked remodification of my original 2012 Orichalcos challenge deck profile called the special deck build that I did back in 2012. It was the very first Orichalcos model I ever did. I decided for the difficulty scale of the challenge to make this particular model the easy mode, the easiest one that you can beat, but at the same time can be a bit challenging at the same time. Only this time with this particular deck profile, I've made some modifications, I've changed some things, but anyway, instead of me blabbering all night long, I'll just show you all. So let's get started. First up, we got 2 copies of Orichalcos Shunoros. Hold on, guys. Let me just adjust this here. There we go. I apologize, folks. This is a new setup I'm working with, so forgive me. Please forgive me. If you ever watch this, Brian, that's for you. Anyway, 2 copies of Orichalcos Shunoros. Essentially, I pay 500 life points to special summon this from my hand. And as long as it's on the field, all battle damage I take drops to 0. And if this thing gets essentially blown up in any way, shape, or form, then this little doodad comes out. Orichalcos Shunoros, along with Dexia and Aristeros. Get them adjusted so you can see all 3 of them. There we go. Perfect. There we go. Shunoros, essentially, he's special summoned when Shunoros is blown up, and he gobbles, and his attack points is equal to how much damage Shunoros absorbs. Dexia here is basically your sword of the deck. It's always 300 points higher in attack points in the monster it's battling. And Aristeros here is your shield. It's going to be always 300 defense points higher than the monster it's battling. And if one of my other monsters would be attacked, I can redirect the attack to Aristeros. And essentially, if Shunoros gets blown up, the arms go with him, and when that happens, essentially, all heck breaks loose. Bang! Divine Serpent. Essentially, when he pretty much, there we go. Perfect. Essentially, when he hits the board, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So I apologize. It's been a long time since I did a deck profile of this deck, and I'm getting used to my new lighting. Anyway, Divine Serpent. Essentially, when Shunoros gets blown up, he's summoned to the field, and when he's summoned, your entire hand goes to the graveyard, and your life points go to 0. But as long as Divine Serpent is on the field, you remain in the game regardless of any win conditions. And also, he has infinite attack and defense points. However, in order to attack with this monster, you must send the top 10 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Next up, 1 Orichalcos Gygus. Essentially, with Gygus here, his function is pretty simple, to the point. Every time he's blown up, he comes right back 500 points stronger each and every time. That's essentially what he does. However, even though he can resurrect himself multiple times and gain attack points to boot, you unfortunately have to skip your next draw phase. So, that's what happens. Next up, 1 Orichalcos Doom Beetle. One of the staples of this deck. And essentially how he works is if he's destroyed while I control an Orichalcos field spell, I can apply one of these effects. I can inflict 800 damage to my opponent for each card in their hand, or I can summon this card in attack position. So I can either resurrect him or burn you. It's that simple. Next up, 2 copies of Orichalcos Magus. Now, Magus's function is very simple. He's one of the many beat sticks in this deck, and he gains 400 attack points for every other Orichalcos monster I control. So this guy can get very big in a hurry. So unless you have like a bottomless trap hole or a mirror force ready to go, something to stop this guy, he's gonna be a big problem. Next up, 1 Lord of the Orichalcos Army. Essentially what this little guy does is that he negates any card of he negates any, let me read this so I don't screw this up. He negates the effects of all trap cards that target him. And during your draw phase, you can add a level 4 or lower Orichalcos monster from your deck to your hand instead of conducting your normal draw. So at the cost of your draw phase, you get to road up for a level 4 or lower Orichalcos monster, and at the same time, he's very good at protecting himself from traps, and he's got nice attack points to boot. 2,500 to be specific. Next up, Orichalcos Malevolence. Essentially, you guys should know what Malevolence does by now. Essentially, he can once per turn target a defense position monster your opponent controls and change it to face-up attack position. But I added an additional function to Malevolence just to make him a bit better. Essentially, if he's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, my opponent sends the top 3 cards of their deck to the graveyard. So if you attack and destroy this guy, you're going to be losing some cards off the top of your deck in the process. Next up, Orichalcos Soldier. Now this guy is a monster of monsters, as well as a big threat in this deck. Why is that, you may ask? I'll tell you. Cannot be normal summoned or set. If you control an Orichalcos field spell, you can special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn only, you can destroy 1 card on the field. This effect cannot be used if you don't control an Orichalcos field spell. While this card is face up on the field, monsters your opponent controls lose 200 attack during each of their standby phases. So yeah, this guy is a bit busted, but at the same time, this deck needs it. Next up, one of my staples for any model of the Orichalcos challenge, and that would be good old Nightbeam. Essentially, if it's normal summoned, I can add essentially up to 3 Orichalcos field spells from my deck to my hand. So I can add a Seal of Orichalcos, a Dutros, a Tritos, or I could do essentially any other combination, as long as it's free Orichalcos field spells. Next up, Orichalcos Shunoros. Now this guy has a big old wall of text on him. So allow me to explain what he does. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned from your hand by banishing 2 Orichalcos monsters from your graveyard. If this card is special summoned, add 1 Orichalcos card from your deck to your hand. This card's original attack is equal to the number of Orichalcos monsters in your graveyard times 400. If a monster or monsters you control would be affected by the effect of an opponent's monster effect, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. If this card would be destroyed, you can banish 1 Orichalcos monster from your graveyard instead. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 2 Orichalcos monsters from your graveyard to special summon this card to your field. You only use each effect once per turn only. So yeah, this guy is essentially a last-ditch effort boss monster, if you will. So that's simply what he is, a big old boss monster. Next up, we got everybody's favorite engine in the whole wide world, your triple tour guides, and my personal favorite to go with the tour guides, 1 Pre-Errata Sangan and 1 Pre-Errata Witch of the Black Forest. Why Pre-Erratas? Simply put it, they're better in my opinion, and they're perfect for the Orichalcos challenge. And plus, this little engine here makes some wonderful searching capabilities and Xyz summons. Wonderful engine. Next up, 1 copy of Cyber Alley, not only to essentially hinder my opponent, but to provide some additional draw power as well. 1 copy of Air Knight Parshaft, not just draw power, but some good damage in the process. And last but not least, good old Dragoness Orichalcos. Essentially, how this guy works is he cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned from your hand by attributing 3 Orichalcos monsters on your field with different names while you control an Orichalcos field spell, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. This card's original attack is equal to the number of cards that are on the field and in both players' hands times 500. If this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, destroy all spell and trap cards on the field. So, if he's destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, he heavy storms your board, but also he can be a very big baddie very quickly. Big boss monster. Next up, heart and soul of the deck. You guys have seen this many times. The triple Seal of Orichalcos, UDE Seal of Orichalcos is to be specific, with that lovely spell speed for negation discarding from the hand effect. I shouldn't have to explain much. I mean, if you've seen many Orichalcos challenges, you should know what they do by now. Along at the same time, you also need an Orichalcos Deutros and a Tritos. Very good for life points, and Tritos protects your monsters from spells and traps. Next up, Orichalcos Chimeraire and Orichalcos Galaxy. These are essentially 2 additional layers to the Seal of Orichalcos. Essentially, to put it simply, all Chimeraire really does is it gives your Orichalcos monster, it gives all your monsters an additional 500 attack, and they are treated as Inferno monsters, while Galaxy gives you an additional 1000 attack and are treated as evil monsters, in addition to the normal attribute. So that's what these guys do, essentially. Next up, 2 Chosen Destinies. Pay 1,000 light points to either add an Orichalcos card from my deck to my hand, or I can destroy one, ignoring its effects. That's simple. Next up, 1 copy of Orichalcos. I can once per turn pay 1,000 to add an Orichalcos card from my deck or graveyard to my hand. Next up, the legendary City of Atlantis. One of my additional trump cards for this deck. Essentially, it is also always treated as an Orichalcos card, which means it can be searched, and can only be activated while you control an Orichalcos field spell. Once per turn only, if you control 4 or more Orichalcos cards on the field with different names, except an Orichalcos field spell, you can draw 2 cards. You can only control 1, the Ancient City of Atlantis, on the field. So excluding an Orichalcos field spell, if you have 4 or more Orichalcos cards with different names, you essentially pot agreed. It's just that simple. Next up, Orichalcos Soul Deception. Now this card is a good one. It can only be activated while you control an Orichalcos field spell, and control 3 Orichalcos monsters with different names. Once per turn only. You contribute 1 Orichalcos monster you control, take control of 1 monster your opponent controls, with an attack less than or equal to the attributed monster's attack. So at the cost of an Orichalcos monster, you can take 1 monster your opponent controls that has an attack less than or equal to the attributed monster's attack. Very good. Next up, Orichalcos Forcum. Now this card here is pretty much my main primary way to do burn damage. Here's how it works. Cannot be activated unless you control an Orichalcos field spell. If your opponent summons a monster, they take damage equal to half of that monster's original attack. So I can do little bursts of burn damage over time for whenever you summon a monster. Next up, Impure Orichalcos. Essentially, while I have an Orichalcos field spell, all monsters I control gain 300 attack points. Next up, 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, 1 Allure of Darkness, 1 Lightning Vortex, and 1 Dark Hole, and lastly, 1 Call of the Haunted. That rounds up the main deck. Time to show you all the extra deck. First up, I got 2 copies of Orichalcos Gem Dragon. Now, this is essentially a reworked / modified version of the pre-errata version of the original Orichalcos Dragon card, only a bit more modernized. How it works is simple. It requires 2 level 4 Orichalcos monsters to make it. This card's name is also always treated as Orichalcos Dragon. You can detach 1 material to add an Orichalcos card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. You can detach 1 material to banish 1 card on the field. You can only use each effect once per turn only. You can only control 1 Orichalcos Gem Dragon. So essentially, I can not only get me more resources, but I can banish a card in the process as well. It's just that simple. Other than that, I have a Gemnite Pearl, Maestro Passivity Daijin, Tornado Dragon, Steel Swarm Roach, Rhinosaurus, Terabyte, Ghost Trick Alucard, Levier the Sea Dragon, Tempo the Percussion Djinn, Wind Up Zenmains, number 17 Leviathan Dragon, Wind Up Zenmeister, and lastly, number 66 Master Key Beetle. And that rounds up the extra deck. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Sorry for the lighting adjusting. I'm trying to get used to this new lighting setup to help provide you all with better content, I hope. So apologize for the interruptions here and there with that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Expect the normal Orichalcos Challenge deck profile along with the Nightmare Mode Orichalcos Challenge deck profile to come very soon. But until then, this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master 88 saying see you later.